You don't know at what point it's going to close and what's going to get into that box during that period of time that you open it. So those, as they say in the Supreme Court, Richard, you're the lawyer, I'm not, but you know, the settled issues when they interview these, when they testify, these candidates, these nominees for the Supreme Court, and these senators beat them over the head about this case and that case, and they don't want to answer it, or they want to punt. They just say, well, that's a settled issue. That was settled by you know, 200 years ago. Well, these were settled issues, land use issues in this town. And it's not just here, but it's all over the city. And what's happening now is that those settled issues are under attack. And if you don't wake up, and I don't think I think I'm preaching to the converted here, certainly judging from the committee reports that you got. But I'm saying this to you because it's being taped, and I want you to carry this message out to your neighbors and your friends around the city. If you care about the things that you have won over the years, and many of you have lived here a long time, I mean, there are people who have lived here longer than I've represented you, and that's a long time. So if you care about your quality of life, if you have assumed that the kinds of protections that you won, thanks to the Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association and your neighboring homeowners association, if you assume that those are inviolate, guess again, because the city, first of all, developers are going to the city and saying, we want exemptions, we want variances, we want deviations, and the city is granting them, one after the other, all over the city. And every single one of these things is a battle. And when you have a specific plan, the reason we went through all of these struggles in the old days, you know, we had a period in the 40s and 50s and 60s in this town where the developers ruled the roost. Council members were indicted and convicted and went to prison. Some avoided prison by resigning their office. I mean, those were, and some represented this area before Joel. You had people who were in trouble. So we know what that political environment was around. Then the pendulum swung the other way. And you had people like the Brownies and the Waxes, I'll leave myself out of it, but the Joy Picuses and the people who had a sense that there needed to be some balance and some environmental protection, that the quality of life was something that was worth fighting for and was our obligation. And that lasted in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And now, you know, we're at a point where there are public officials, elected officials, I won't mention any names, but who say the crane is the city bird. The crane is not the city bird, and it should never be considered that. It's got to be a balance. It's got to be a balance. It's never going to be 100% one way or 100% the other way, but it can't be. It can be 100% one way if the other side, the countervailing force, you in this case, standing up for this neighborhood, don't stand up and make your voices heard. And I'm not speaking about your local councilman or councilwoman. They work hard. They do the best they can. There are only two people. It's a 15-member city council. It's not just the city council. There's a mayor who has his own ideas about development in the city, and they're very pro-development. There's a planning commission, which has been very pro-development in the city. There's a state legislature, which has passed laws which has required the cities, not just Los Angeles, but every city in the state, to allow exemptions from established plans. This is the infamous SB 1818 law, which was approved really under everybody's radar screen about 4 or 5 years ago by the legislature. Practically no dissenting votes. And what does it do? It allows density bonuses and Florida area ratio bonuses. Florida area ratio is the size and bulk of a building. On Ventura Boulevard, most of the Ventura Boulevard is 1.5 square feet of building for every square foot of land. So it's a 1.5 to 1 Florida area ratio. It used to be 3 to 1. And when Brownie and I put Proposition U, the density, the cut density in half, floor area ratios in half in the city on commercial properties, it went from 3 to 1.5 to 1. And it really brought down the size and scale of development all over the city of Los Angeles. And by the way, at that time, that was in 1986, real estate developers, the LA Times, Daily News editorials, they all editorialized against this measure. All the special interests said it would be a disaster for the economy, it would be terrible, it would hurt jobs. Last time I checked, whether it's on Ventura Boulevard or on Sepulveda Boulevard or on Fairfax Avenue or on La Brea Avenue, it doesn't seem to have hurt the real estate market at all. And by the way, despite all the endorsements against that measure, Prop U, 69% of the people of the city voted for it. And now, thanks to SB 1818, that proposition is being undermined. Why? Because it requires, get this, it says that any developer who walks into any city hall or any hall of administration, the county hall of administration, anywhere in California, and says he wants to build affordable housing, and I'll explain what affordable housing means under the state law, they would get, if they set aside 5% of their project, of their residential project for affordable housing. So you have 100 units you're entitled to by zoning, for the sake of argument. You say you will provide 5 units of affordable housing. You get a 35% density bonus. So you go to 135 or whatever 35% on top of 105 is. So in exchange for 5% of sacrifice, if affordable housing is a sacrifice, you get 35% more development rights. What a deal that is. What a deal that is. And so essentially with a stroke of the pen, the legislature said, Ventura Boulevard specific plan, whatever you thought it was, it's now 35% higher. It also allows a developer to come in and ask for the city, and the city almost in every case would have to grant it an exceedance from the height limit. So you have a 2-story height limit here on Ventura Boulevard? Guess again. If I come in and say I'm going to set aside 5 units for an apartment house on Ventura Boulevard, I get to go 35% higher, which means 3 stories. And in some cases even higher than that, depending on what the city council and the mayor are going to allow them to do. That's ridiculous. And then, whoever it was that talked about these transportation corridors, very interesting. If you have a piece of commercial property on a transit corridor, now where I come from, a transit corridor is where the subway is. I'll even say where the orange line is, where the blue line is, where the green line is. Those are transit corridors. In New York City, transit corridors are not 45th Street or 46th Street. They're 42nd Street, 5th Avenue, and 6th Avenue. They're where the subway lines are. They're not every street in town. But under the city's definition, because the state law requires the city to define what a transit corridor is, it's any street which has a red line bus on it, okay? Now, that includes Ventura Boulevard, it includes, I asked the MTA, I said, give me a list of all the streets that have red line buses in my old council district. And it's basically, with a few exceptions, basically every major commercial street. And so if your property is within 1,500 feet of a bus stop on such a corridor, which is to say every bus stop is within, every property is within 1,500 feet of a bus stop, just about, then every one of those properties is considered to be on a transit corridor. So 3rd Street, those of you who know my neighborhood, I mean, you don't have a lot of red buses out here, but on the other side of the hill, almost every major street has a red bus. 3rd Street is a transit corridor. Beverly Boulevard is a transit corridor. And it allows for even more exceedances from the height, floor to area ratio, and density limitations that are established in the law, in the community plan, in the specific plan. So why am I telling you all this? You have the power, and now I sound like one of these presidential candidates. You have the power.
Change. Sorry.
To communicate to your elected officials, both in Sacramento